Hello and welcome to a new video. Today I'm going to be talking about a couple of things that were sent to me regarding Scorn. So let's begin. So with two videos totaling in at about 35 minutes, it's no surprise to say that the new trailer, the release date trailer, has given us quite a bit to work with, despite the actual trailer part being less than a minute long. But there is more to talk about, as one of the environmental artists who works at Ebb Software actually sent me a link to his ArtStation page where he had some additional pictures showing the area at different angles and some behind the scenes stuff. Of those pictures, this one ended up being the most significant. The key takeaway is actually the shot of the statues here, where we can see that the cords sprouting from the female figures connect directly into the back of those flower pods. Initially, it was actually a bit difficult to tell where those vines were going to, and I was kind of under the assumption they just disappeared into the floor itself, connected to some unknown mechanism or whatever. Or perhaps even they kind of snaked out and are what's draping over the sides. But this implies a much more thorough connection between the statues and those flowers, which makes the next thing that was on the ArtStation an animated GIF showing the progress of this area being built all the more poignant. Now, if you haven't seen my video on the 24th update, specifically part 2, you might not get why this is so significant. So I would recommend you watch that first. So here is one of the stills from the GIF that shows the very basic untextured shot of the room. You can see in the bottom right that the model for Scorn Guy is the player model that actually appears in the game. He has no head because, well, it's a player model. You don't need that because the camera is the head. And everything else is untextured and low resolution. We also get a little bit more detail with the statue in the center, but amusingly there's actually some difference between the rib cage in this shot and the rib cage that he eventually has in the final product. His rib cage here actually bends down a little bit, not quite as much as the female statue's rib cage is, but bends down nonetheless. Which, of course, in the final version, his rib cage extends outward to his sides horizontally. It's also possible to see that the circular platforms the female statues are on are connected to each other by a narrow bridge. And finally, you get a better look at the skulls or faces on the sides of the circular platform. As it turns out, I was right all along. There really was one in that center spot, just lower than what I said it was. Now, that's all well and good. It's a nice behind-the-scenes look at the area, and it does make me wonder if that area is actually in the final game, or if it's something constructed specifically for the trailer. I responded to the person who posted that asking him, but he said he is unable to divulge any information due to signing an NDA. But if that was it, I probably wouldn't be making this video because there's not honestly a lot of information there. It's another part of the GIF that really got me thinking. Now I know what you're thinking. Hold on a second, I don't see those smaller head statues on the railing where Scorn Guy is standing. And you're correct, and they aren't in the other one as well. But if you look very closely, you'll notice that the female statues aren't the same. Now this is why it was important to show that Scorn Guy's model was just kind of a placeholder, a temporary thing to show where he'd be positioned, because the models for the female statues are kind of similar. You can even see that the tube running to their heads doesn't connect properly. But what I'm very curious about is why that specific model of that entity. There already exists a full body model of this thing, one that was created over a year before this trailer was, and yet they went with this one, which has a peculiar pipe sticking out of its chest, its back, and some component coming out of its head. But of course, the big thing is, the one that kind of ties it all together, is its stomach, which is not the same that we saw in the May 2020 trailer, but we have seen it. It's the very same brightly glowing, blood-filled pod thing that's connected to the pillar that's growing those flower pods. The one that we saw in the gameplay trailer a few times. The one that we've connected to the healing items in the game, which in turn had connections to those entities themselves. It's possible that these variations do exist in the game, just in a different area. In any case, for how esoteric Scorn is, for how difficult it is to say one thing or another conclusively about the game's world and lore, I think this might be the closest thing to a confirmation about at least part of what we were theorizing about earlier as we could possibly get. The red, vibrant liquid in the stomach of those entities, be it in the work in progress or the final build, is somehow connected to the flower pods, and is probably connected with the healing stuff in general in this game. That wasn't the only thing sent to me. A different person just recently linked me to a behind-the-scenes look at Ebb Software, published by some Serbian digital something that was doing a brief documentary on the studio. The video itself is available to the public to watch, but it is in a language that, alas, I do not speak, and therefore I have almost no idea about what these people are saying. Lazar, one of the 3D artists who's working on Ebb Software and was there since the Kickstarter days at least, is the main person being interviewed. For those of you who are wondering, Peklar does not seem to be in it, and if he is, we don't know. He remains an elusive guy. Now, even though I can't understand what they're saying, there are some things I was able to notice in the documentary. Some new things we haven't seen before. The first was on this person's trio of monitors. You can see 2 pieces of concept art and a little bit of gameplay footage showing off more of the HUD, including, for the first time, the health bar, which also appears on the other guy's monitor as well. Now, the concept art is pretty interesting. The one on the right is a Scornified version of the logo for ATIC, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, who is the person working on the soundtrack and some of the sound design for the game. It's entirely possible that would even be the cover for the vinyl record and the digital soundtrack as well. And the one on the left is a concept art of a Scorn person growing out of a wall. We've seen one such picture before, though this one is far more vibrant and shows off the sort of features seen in another concept art. Specifically, it has the same sort of head structure and features as the mural Scorn guy. Thanks to the power of image editing software, I was able to combine the two angles into a full picture. Since this is him growing out of a wall, this is about the earliest he would look in the game, unaugmented by any machinery. And yet, not only does he come out with a fully formed head crest, but his hand is kind of segmented, similar to, say, the hand of a doll, as opposed to like Scorn Guy where he has skin covering his fingers and knuckles. Additionally, you can see two lines running down from his nostril to nearby his chin. Scorn Guy has something similar, but those lines connect and then run down as a single line. It's actually closer to the pre-alpha model for Scorn Guy. And finally, unlike the concept art that we got earlier, he has all his fingers. The color scheme makes it seem closer to what we saw in the 2016 trailer than anything else. The shot then transitions to another person working on the game, and we get a good view of his monitor. On it, we get a list of locations. There's Abate Assembly A, Abate Assembly B, and Crater Tunnels. For those of you who were digging deep into Scorn lore before this video came out, you probably recognize those locations as the ones listed on the demo files. There's AI Playground, which is probably a testing area for the various mobs in the game. There's Ectogenesis Wall, which is probably the walls that Scorn people grow out of. Ecto meaning outside of, Genesis meaning birth or beginning. Next on the list is called Essentials, which might be closer to AI Playground than an actual location in-game. There's Field of Decay and Graveyard, which are two areas we have no idea about. And finally, there's the Orphis Crater, which is the area that the person working on the game here is currently looking at. It's another area absolutely ravaged by bears. Given how the clip itself transitions from this view of his computer screen to this shot from the 2020 Series X trailer, I do wonder if that is a location he was looking at. At least that's how I assume someone would put together a mini documentary. Further to the right are some preview pictures of different assets. All of them, as far as I can tell, being pillars or pillar components. The area he's looking at specifically is called the Outer Ring, probably the outermost area of the area he's looking in. And then on the far right are a multitude of different assets related to the bears. There's at least 36 of them from what it looks like, though I think one of those says 60 something on it. There's a lot of bears in this game. Unfortunately, as far as asset names go, or level names go, that's the best we can get from this trailer. All the other ones are too blurry or too far away to read any of the words. The next shot of interest is this one here, with someone working on a bit of the environment. I suspect strongly that what he's working on is an external shot of the domed hub area seen in the most recent Kickstarter update. It has the same kind of sliding paneling seen in the update, though a bit worse for wear on his computer screen. The thick green haze surrounding everything also makes it look similar. Now, according to the update, there's multiple of these hubs, so it might not be specifically the one we were shown, but it is one of them very likely nonetheless. The video then cuts to somebody working on modeling some piping or tubing asset from the game, which I imagine she worked on quite a lot due to the sheer number of pipes and tubes that exist in Scorn World. These people are up to their eyes in tubing. And then the camera moves to the left and we see a shot of some guy working on a different part of the environment. And amusingly enough, the pictures on his right monitor are actually kind of recognizable. In the top right and bottom left pictures, you're able to clearly see a couple of components from machinery like this. Specifically the four-fingered grabbing thing, and the spheres themselves, which look like they actually have their glass interiors on them, rather than being just cages like in the 2020 gameplay trailer. It's not the exact same place, but it does seem to be those components. As for what else he's working on, I have no idea. We've seen in the previous gameplay trailers as well as the demo how Scorn Guy gets a new weapon. He goes up to the gun rack itself, grabs a piece, and slides it onto the end of the module. Therefore, he likely starts with the handle and gets all of the gun components, the shooty bits, along the way. In the video, we actually see him do that with the pistol, the gun that has been featured in just about every piece of Scorn media all the way back to the 2014 trailer. So unless it's a case where he loses his pistol and gets another one, or this is an upgrade, this is probably a very early part of the game we're looking at. The gun rack even has the same general setup as the one that contained the grenade launchers. There's some more text on the screens here, but again, it's impossible for me to decipher what they're saying. But it seems they're working with yet even more tube and pipe assets. And that is basically the end of what I could notice from this video or little documentary here. I would be interested in knowing what was being said in general, though I suspect it's probably just a overview of how the studios run, what they're working on, and what their goals are. Still, it really is interesting to get a little behind the scenes look at their development. And when you compare their new studio to the one they had previously, all the way back at the start of their Kickstarter campaign, if not earlier, you can see they have gotten a lot bigger as a studio and dev team. Perhaps in the future we'll get even more insight into the project and how it's going. But as of now, I think what I would much rather have if another update is posted in January is maybe a list of names for some of the creatures and entities like this thing here, because I am tired of trying to figure out what to call them each video. Until next time, I hope you enjoyed the video, that I gave you something to think about and otherwise entertained you. Take care.